Trump is crushing the market. Tesla down 50%, Amazon down 30%, Palantir down 40%, and Apple down 27%. We are going to have the biggest recession or depression that the world has ever seen. Or maybe Trump is not as crazy as some might think. Maybe we are going to avoid the 1929 type of depression because of what Trump is doing. In this video, I'm going to help you understand why Trump is doing what he's doing with the tariffs, why others don't like it, and what I think about it. My name is Mariusz Konieczny, and I've been investing in the stock market full-time for 16 years. I'm also the author of 11 books on investing and the founder of microcapexplosions.com. United States has a massive problem. We all know that we have an inflation problem in this country, but this is just a symptom of a bigger problem. You see, the US national debt is rising by $1 trillion about every 100 days. Right now, the debt is approaching $37 trillion, and our government is spending approximately $2 trillion more than it is collecting in revenues. If nothing is done about it, then the 1929 Great Depression will look like walk in the park. You think that the current inflation is a problem? How about the price of eggs doubling from the time you shop to the time you get home? Yes, German-style hyperinflation of 1923. You think interest rates are high right now? Where do you think interest rates are going to be when there is hyperinflation and the lenders have to get compensated for the currency's loss of purchasing power? People are now complaining that the government workers are getting fired left and right and that some benefits are getting cut. I have a better idea. How about spending 90% of government revenue just on servicing the debt and having nothing left for Medicare, Social Security, or anything that we might actually need? If you're old and cannot work, too bad. Maybe you should consider dying tomorrow. In this section, I'm going to talk about how Donald Trump thinks he's going to fix these problems. But now, I want to make one thing clear. I'm not endorsing him. I'm not saying that these things are going to work. All I am doing in this video here is showing you his reasoning, and then you can decide on your own if his reasoning makes sense or not. First, tariffs. In 2024, the US government collected $4.9 trillion in revenues and spent $6.8 trillion on expenses. This is a big problem. Trump administration views tariffs as just another revenue source that could make a dent in the budget deficit.
So looking at, say, a year from now, so beginning of next April, do you have any sense of how much the U.S. government anticipates bringing in from the tariffs announced yesterday?
Could it be anywhere from $300 billion to $600 billion a year? Sure.
Considering the US imports approximately $4 trillion worth of goods and services, generating between 300 and 600 billion of tariff revenue is quite possible. While the tariffs might sound crazy, they actually used to be a major source of revenue for the government. From 1790 to 1860, tariffs accounted for 90% of federal government revenue. This changed after 1913, when the federal income tax was established. While tariffs have the potential to significantly increase government's revenues, in the long term, Trump wants the tariffs to create domestic production and jobs by making foreign products less competitive.
The ultimate goal of the tariffs, and the president says it all the time, bring your factory here. So what will happen over time, we'll have substantial tariff income in the beginning. Manufacturers will build their factory here. The tariffs will drop, but the revenue from the factories, from income taxes, from all the new jobs will go up.
This would grow US GDP by increasing consumption because people would have better jobs, increasing investment because companies would have to spend money on capex to open factories, increasing exports because the US would have more products to sell abroad, and decreasing imports because more products would be made at home. Also, government spending could be reduced and we could still have GDP growth. You see, right now, government spending has to be out of control just to keep GDP from collapsing. But this out of control spending causes government to borrow more money. Lower government spending reduces the budget deficit. Lower budget deficit reduces the need for the government to borrow. Lower government's need to borrow reduces the interest rates. One of the reasons why interest rates have been going up over the last few years is because the US government had to borrow so much money. Big borrowing demand pushed interest rates higher. So lower government spending reduces the pressure on interest rates. Also, all this chaos in the equity markets from the tariffs uncertainty causes people to sell stocks and buy bonds, thus lowering interest rates. Since January, the yield on the US 10-year treasuries went down from almost 5% to less than 4%. This has a big impact on how much the government has to spend to service its debt.
10-year bond having almost peaked at 5 is now through 4. Way to think about it is every basis point's about $1 billion in savings. So we've saved $100 billion.
Also, lower interest rates are desperately needed right now because the US government has to refinance $7 trillion worth of its debt in 2025. So these are his reasonings behind the tariffs. Trump wants to use them to increase government's revenues in the short term and grow the GDP in the long term by creating better paying jobs, which in turn will increase government revenues. Of course, there's a lot of criticism about Trump's tariffs from the media and the mainstream economists. Here are some reasons for why his tariffs are not popular. Trump tries to sell the idea of tariffs as if they were something that only exporting countries paid. They don't. Tariffs are paid by US importers, and the extra cost can be absorbed by the consumer, importing company, and exporting company. But they are not paid by the exporting countries. Consequently, without a doubt, these tariffs will cause prices to go up on US consumers. But wait a minute, didn't he promise to lower prices and reduce inflation? Exactly. These tariffs are just another tax on US consumers. Also, while his reasoning behind tariffs works well on paper, nothing happens in isolation. Other countries can retaliate with their own tariffs. For example, China just imposed 34% reciprocal tariffs on imports of US goods in retaliation for Trump's trade war. Not only that, but consumers in other countries are boycotting US products. So is this going to improve the trade deficits when other countries are boycotting US products and are going to be importing less of them? Of course, the markets are not liking any of this. Stocks are selling off hard, so people are not only going to have to pay more for goods and services, but they're also losing value in their portfolios and retirement accounts. There are just no winners in this trade war and only losers.
There's been some tension in the economic relationship of the United States and China. I think that tension has been wrongly created on both sides. I think we're equally guilty of being stupid. If there's one thing we should do, it's get along with China, and we should have a lot of free trade with China.
Even though I don't like that my portfolio has lost a lot of its value because of all this uncertainty, I do understand why Trump is doing what he's doing. I'm not going to sit here and just say that he's dumb and he doesn't know what he's doing, but I have absolutely no idea whether this is going to work or not. But here's what I do know. The status quo is not acceptable, meaning we cannot have out of control government spending. We cannot have US national debt spiraling out of control. We will never get rid of the inflation because it is the government budget deficits that are responsible for creating this inflation. Also, we cannot have other countries put tariffs on US imports and expect that the US will just sit there and be okay with this. So my hope is that Trump's tariffs will just scare other countries into negotiating better trade deals with the US, and Trump finds other ways to address the problems of federal budget deficits, US national debt, and of course interest rates. With that being said, thank you for watching, subscribe to this channel, click on the notification button, like the video, and see you next time.